either in the Guard or Reserve, or maybe you're back home taking a break from some awesome responsibilities. If you wear the uniform of our armed services, if you have worn the uniform of our armed services, either in wartime or in peacetime, would you please stand and be recognized by our assembly today? Thank you. And the second question is a slight variation on that. If you currently have a loved one, a member of your family, serving in the armed forces, or perhaps enrolled in one of our service academies, or in the Guard or Reserve, or if you have a loved one who's just recently completed a tour of duty and is a newly minted veteran, would you please stand and be recognized? All those with loved ones in the service right now. Now, perhaps this demonstrates just how different an election year 2010 really is. Because I always like to point out that the gentleman whom I'm challenging for the U.S. Senate could have stood on both counts. A new generation of McCains serving in the armed forces, one of John's sons in the Marines, the other at Annapolis. And of course, we all are mindful of the service and the very real sacrifice of our senior senator. And we thank him for that service. But it's precisely because of that service and the service that many of you have rendered that in our free society, when we have policy disagreements, we use the political process to determine the course of action we should take in terms of those who serve in public office. I know this should be more about we than me, but if you just allow me this personal indulgence, if you ever want to attract attention, not all of it necessarily welcome attention, but if you ever want to do so, just challenge the presidential nominee of your party 2 years after he's been the standard bearer nationally. It's been fascinating, the interest that has been exhibited. Forgive this turn of phrase, but the alliteration just captured me. A few months ago, we were in the tiny town of Tonopah, and over 200 Tonopahns came to a town hall meeting one Saturday afternoon, and we had a great time just discussing what was going on in the country, but also in attendance was a television network bearing the initials NHK, N as in Nippon, as in Japan. So Japanese television joined us, and then, you know, it's interesting, the vagaries of Arizona geography. Wouldn't you know that the city bearing the name Maricopa is across the county line in Pinal? But a while back, there was a wonderful Sunday afternoon Tea Party rally there as temperatures for the first time kind of got to the triple digits, and it was most uncomfortable for a crew there from Dutch television. And then, even earlier, Mary and I were at a meeting of the Palo Verde Republican women, and a reporter was there, one of our British cousins from the Daily Telegraph in the UK. And Gary, you might get a kick out of this. He described your speaker tonight thusly, and I quote, "Hayworth, the candidate of broad shoulders, excellent vocal projection, and Trump-like hair." Fellow citizens, no Velcro is attached here, nor is this coiffure done in turbanesque fashion. This is real hair, and a quick check of the bank account would indicate it's several millions bereft. So no real resemblance to the Donald. The reason I mentioned those particular vignettes, in addition to the obligatory laugh lines, is because it seems that the international journalists who visit us have an easier time getting their arms around what this election year is all about, in stark contrast to those who inhabit the newsrooms of Washington, D.C. and New York City with all their faux sophistication. No, those who are visiting understand quite quickly that this year of 2010 is all about this document, the Constitution of the United States, and whether or not we will continue as a constitutional republic. Maybe you've had the same discussions in your house that we've had in ours. Mary asked one night, taking a look at these kids of ours, saying, you know, honey, will these children grow up with the same freedoms and the same type of America as we grew up in? And indeed, I believe this reawakening we've seen around the country, made manifest in the Tea Party movement, is precisely because of that concern. Yesterday it was a very interesting day because 16 Tea Party affiliated groups formally endorsed my campaign for the U.S. Senate. And mindful of Mark Twain's admonition that history does not repeat itself but it rhymes, I hearken back to a day in 1994 when about I'd say almost, obviously 435 seats in the Congress, but in all probably close to 500 people stood on the west front of the Capitol in Washington, D.C. and signed a document called the Contract with America. Now, you and I happen to believe and realize that the very first contract with America was ratified in 1787. But I thought it was important yesterday, amidst all the negativity and the name calling and the personal attacks that have been launched against me, the notion is leadership by example. And you get that by talking about the issues we confront. Now, I understand, and we'll get into this in a little while, why the incumbent doesn't want to talk about the issues. Because that would force him to talk about his record. And it's a record where you and I have a lot of disagreements with it. But I just feel it's important to offer affirming reasons for your consideration and support for the United States Senate. And again, we need only look so far as this Constitution, because it is imbued in the 10 principles that I brought forth yesterday concurrently with the endorsements of the Tea Party organizations in my contract with Arizona. You don't have to look too far. You go to this document, and Article 1, Section 1 reads as follows. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States. Very simple, very straightforward. And yet, the 20th century will be remembered for the rise of the de facto fourth branch of government, the regulatory bureaucracy, where Congress ceded its lawmaking authority to the executive branch, in some cases to cabinet-level agencies, but more often than not, to a plethora of independent executive regulatory agencies, a veritable alphabet soup of acronyms. FCC, FEC, OSHA, EPA. And woe to the American, woe to the citizen who ends up on the wrong side of the regulatory bureaucracy. Maybe you've been through that in your work or in some avenue of your life. And those who've had to endure and dust up a dispute with the regulatory agency say they feel as if they've been put on trial, but they don't have the benefit of legal counsel, nor a jury of their peers. Instead, there is a, metaphorically speaking, a hanging judge.